How you guys doing? This is very important in reference to facts and history of my mother and father, and in reference to my mother and father's estates, and in reference to the history and documents and guidelines of what my parents had submitted to the Treasury in reference to accounts and credit cards that I was supposed to have had, and trust fund information, and why my parents said I wasn't supposed to have to work. Do you understand about people being independently wealthy? Do you understand that? My parents owned parent companies. You know that, right? Parent companies of subsidiary companies. Now, this is very important in reference to interest accounts, too, that my parents had on monies for me and the amounts of money. This is very important in reference to guidelines and the crimes of government and their hostage game and their activity of trying to steal my money from me and my mother and father's estates. You know, in reference to the information, I want it documented and put in the media how much my trust funds are and how much the lawsuits are in reference to the government trying to murder me and the government trying to steal my trust funds. This is very important. See, these government people have tried to steal my identity. They tried to play the kill switch. Like they tried to kill me, they tried to murder me, and then they tried to switch my identity with an impersonator that would try to steal my mother and father's mansions and that was trying to steal my mother and father's estates. And this man was trying to live out my life by holding me hostage when my DNA is one of a kind. What race are your impersonators, American government? It is unethical and it is criminal for the United States government to be conspiring against my ownership. My parents was legends of America in business, and they were legends in Hollywood too. So was my grandparents. So in reference to the dirty activity of government and the dirty history of government, they need to get prosecuted, whoever these bad government people are. Now in reference to wealth and revenues, and I'm the owner of the companies, and my revenues are my revenues. So in reference to the point of information of when it known and documented in the media how much money these people are blocking me from. I'm the owner of my mother and father's companies and revenues. I'm the owner of my mother and father's estates. Do you understand that? But the government has to get charged for enslavement, for blocking me from my monies and endangering my life, and torturing me and burning me from satellite when I've been at work, when I've been out in public, and they've been burning me from satellite here at this little house. Why are they blocking me from my mother and father's mansions? They kidnapped me from my mother and father's mansions, and they tried to use an impersonator to try to steal my life and my financial wealth of my parents. I am the owner of my mother and father's estates forever. So in reference to this government man and his people playing these tricks, your impersonator is not richer than me. Your impersonator does not own anything that I'm the owner of. Your impersonator does not have the status that I have. Your impersonator is not a royal of my mother and father and family history. Your impersonator is a communist thief and a terrorist. And your impersonators must get prosecuted for trying to steal my identity. Now, in reference to the activity, somebody on the internet needs to explain what it means in reference to a person being independently wealthy, such as me, who I am. Like, for instance, if somebody has interest accounts that bring in millions of dollars a month or millions or billions of dollars a year, which, my mother and father had interest accounts for me. Plus, my trust funds was over $2.4 trillion, or 4.8 trillion, in reference to my mother and in reference to my father. It's over 4.8 trillion, right? And then the government's tried to murder me several times. So then my trust funds is it's probably close to over $500 trillion plus. Because every time the government tries to murder me, or the government tries to injure me, or the government tries to damage me, or burns on my body, or damages my skin, my trust funds go up. The lawsuits go up. Now, you have to understand that these people that are trying to steal from me, these people trying to steal my identity, they're not the same DNA as me. I'm the only child of my parents. I'm the owner of the estates. These people have no connection at all. And it is unethical for the government to fabricate reasons of blocking me from my mother and father's mansions. I grew up in those mansions. I'm the only child of my mother and father. The role protocol in the media is my identity. Not anybody else's in the whole wide world. It's documentation of who I am and who my biological parents are. It's documentation of my birthmarks, beauty marks, and information of who I am. And it's documentation of my teeth. It's documentation of my DNA. It's documentation of birthmarks, beauty marks, and scars that I had when my parents was alive. So in reference to the point of information, and you know, there's numerous offices in America that are probably holding on to monies that my mother had meetings with and had them sign contracts that they would deliver monies to me. Now don't forget, the fact that I'm not supposed to have to work doesn't mean I'm lazy. This is where it comes into very important acknowledgments of what kind of athletic ability I have. Like how fast I can run, how high I can jump. Have I broken any world records in athletics or broken any world records at any jobs or the activity of any sports? Or in reference to my singing ability or in reference to me performing in movies or television. It's very important in reference to careers. You know, even though I was born super rich and I'm the child of my mother and father, my father owned movie companies and production companies and media stations and channels and radio and television and other things. So in reference to the fact of productions and me being in movies and television shows, I'm supposed to be in movies and television shows. Of course, of my mother and father's production company, of which I am the owner. And some possible other types of production of companies or whichever might be co-producing. I'm not sure. It just depends. But the fact that people denying my identity are blocking me from living my life and blocking me from being known in history, it seems like people don't even know who I am, which is a violation of the news media. The fact that they had government people slandering my character, government people blocking me from my production companies, blocking me from my mother and father's corporate offices, of which I'm supposed to have offices there too. I'm supposed to be at my mother and father's offices. I'm supposed to be watching the companies too sometimes, you know. Not just the security personnel. I'm supposed to be watching the companies, looking at the numbers, looking at the revenues, looking at the supplies and products too. You understand that, right? So in reference to the information of why my parents said I was never supposed to have to work is what somebody needs to explain on YouTube. You know, it's kind of like you might go work somewhere for, you know, $100 a day or something. But then daily I have revenues of interest accounts that are in, you know, the hundreds or monthly in the millions of dollars plus. But they're blocking me from them. You understand that? Like you say, okay, well, working this job, you make like $100 a day. That's like, you know, $2,000 a month or something. This is an analogy. As opposed to making billions of dollars a month and having access to billions of dollars. You think, okay, well, what kind of job is that? To be sitting around or working or moving things or lifting things, as opposed to, you know, relaxing and letting your money work for you. You know what I mean? Like money working in accounts or interest accounts or, you know, different types of athletic activity of, you know, history. You know, my father, even though my father was independently wealthy, my father played in the NFL. He played in sports. You guys know that, right? Maybe somebody can express the information of what names my father used when he played in sports. Basketball, football, or baseball, or any of the sports. I have my grandfathers, too. They all played sports. They're historic figures in some sports. And somebody needs to say who they are. Covering that up is fraud, government man. You don't have a right covering up the careers of my mother and father or grandparents when they played in sports. Or if they participated in the Olympics as athletes. You're not allowed to cover that shit up either. You're not allowed to cover up any of that. That's not shit, it's great accomplishments, but meaning like you people try to claim that you thought my parents was no type of athletes when they were very good athletes. Some might say they were a couple of the greatest athletes. The same thing with my grandparents too. So in reference to the information, somebody in the accounting departments of my mother and father's companies need to express why some people are valuable and why they're not supposed to be doing certain types of jobs where they could get injured, or they might get, it might be time wasting, or it might mean that they have money coming in from somewhere else as opposed to having to work at a regular job. Such as, I'm supposed to be looking at the books of my mother and father's companies, supposed to be counting money, and supposed to be, living my life a certain way. You know that, right? Even if it's so-called a prissy lifestyle or super rich kind of touchy-touchy, no-touchy lifestyle, This is very important in reference to the history. Some people are very valuable in life. Some people work in jobs and they get, they make money and stuff like that, and that's what they do. But then some people are like multi-millionaires and multi-billionaires, and you wouldn't expect them to be doing customer service, maybe every once in a while. You wouldn't expect them to be doing, heavy lifting unless they're, working some type of job or working somewhere to try to get better at athletics, or somebody working out in the gym. There's a historic fact of why certain people are born super wealthy, and I'm supposed to be living at my mother and father's mansions. Plus, I'm supposed to be, living at properties of my mother and father's mansions, My parents even built mansions for me when I was little. And I want those shown on television too, and in websites or on websites and in the media. And in reference to my father, when he bought me a limousine when I was a little boy, I want that shown on television too. And all the cars that my mother bought for me, I want those shown on television and on a website and on the internet in reference to what cars the government stole. That needs to be put in the media too. And hello, North Carolina. Somebody wanted to say hello. And hello, friendly cities and states. This is very important in reference to history. Now, somebody needs to explain why my parents had set up monies that I was supposed to receive every week and every day, meaning I was supposed to have access to certain accounts every single day, and certain company, corporate accounts and of my mother and father's corporations, of which I was supposed to have accounts and revenues. Somebody needs to explain a lot of this information on YouTube. I probably won't be able to see it because they block everything I try to look at in reference to me or my mother and father. In reference to the historic facts of documents, it's illegal for the Historic Society to be pretending like they thought I didn't exist. My identity has to be in all the documents of my mother and father and grandparents. You see other people in the media. Other people talk about their relatives. Some people are the child of such and such celebrities, or they're the child or grandchild of such and such person in the media, or a nephew or cousin or something. But nobody seems to be saying anything about who I am. And I own the media companies. Now, I'm the only child of my mother and father. You hear everybody talking about, you watch media and you'll see some news, celebrity news, they'll talk about such and such person is the daughter of such and such. Or such and such male is the son of such and such celebrity. And I own the companies. But nobody seems to be saying who I am. Some of the cops need to go over there to the news media and say, hey, what's the problem? Because the Treasury and the news media even have documents that say they have to do the story of who I am and who my parents are. Otherwise, they lose their jobs. And it could be criminal in reference to if they're tied into any person trying to overshadow who I am or trying to block me from being known in the media. And in reference to Oscars or movies or history of things or music. got to be documented. It's got to be presented. It's got to be presented in the media so everybody knows who I am. So nobody gets away with stealing my identity, and so nobody gets away with stealing my money. So nobody gets away with stealing any of my land or companies or profits or revenues or residuals. It has to be put in the media. Very important information. The Roll Protocol is my identity, not anybody else's. Except it says who my parents are and grandparents and some other family history. But I'm the only child of my mother and father. So, in reference to the situation, they have court records and documents that say they are to force it to go public who I am, even if it means pushing somebody else's media out of the way. These people have been getting away with this for so many years, obviously over 27 years in some acknowledgments, and even longer in reference to my father, which is, in reference to over 40 plus years, And there has to be court cases where people have tried to find ways of trying to put their name out there by covering up mine, or their activity of trying to put their media out there and then they're pretending like I didn't exist. There has to be court cases, and it has to be forced to go public who I am. And somebody needs to explain what it means. Like, there's celebrities that have children. Some people are big celebrities, and some of their children don't work in regular jobs. Some of their children, just live wealthy, and their parents, have certain types of jobs. Or some of their children get into the media, or they get into careers in the media, or music, or whichever. See, that's kind of what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what I've done growing up. Even when my parents was alive, my father would direct movies, my mother would direct movies, and I'd be in movies. It's very important that people know this. And these people are stealing my money and my time slots of where they were supposed to go public with my identity and who I am. And these people have tried to slander my character as their way of buying time to try to steal companies away from me, and property and land and revenues. And obviously the Treasury is not following the guidelines of prosecuting people that steal monies from me, or people that are squatting on monies. That is endangerment, and that is fraud. And in reference to the information, it needs to be publicized. And people need to explain why. Somebody say, well, somebody comes from a rich family, their child didn't have to work very much. But I worked all the time in the media. I grew up in the media. Even performed as a little girl when I was a little boy in movies and television and modeling and things like that. So in reference to people, they need to express who I am and what movies and television shows I was in, and productions of my mother and father, and modeling too. In reference to fashion shows, and they're burning my arms right now, the satellite man is. And in reference to the history of things. And anybody disagreeing with it needs to go to court. I'm the only child of my mother and father forever. I'm supposed to be at my mother and father's mansions. We need the name of the person, whoever the person is that's blocking me from my mother and father's mansions. These people tried to call me stupid, and then they were blocking me from my money. They were calling me stupid, blocking me from my mother and father's mansions that I grew up in. There's some school teachers who would like to talk to some of those people, probably in court. This is total BS, all the stuff these people have done. And they're blocking me from my super rich lifestyle that I was born into, that my parents afforded for me. And then some other clowns, or some clowns, tried to steal everything, fabricating that they were relatives of my mother and father when they are not. And I'm the only one named in my mother and father's estates, and my parents gave me everything when they were alive. And it needs to be put in the media and on the History Channel too. Never signed, never gave, never sold, never, not never. I'm the only child of my parents, and I'm the owner of everything of my mother and father and grandparents forever. And I don't know if they're going to have to do a blackout on TV shows. You ever seen them have to do that? Or on movies in reference to other people's publicity? instead of doing stories about who I am, but that could happen. They could block out the media of other people just to do stories about who I am. Because these people have been blocking stories about who I am all these years. Why they've been publicizing themselves. And I'm the owner of the media companies. So, there's legal right to block them from publicity or them publicizing themselves and disrespecting my rights of being known in the media. Lots of things of importance.